Agenda for America, an African-American perspective. A national conversation presented by Smiley Audio Media Incorporated, KBLA Talk 1580, and executive produced by Tavis Smiley. Tonight's conversation is the state of black women in America and features an all-star panel of empowering black women who you will meet in just a moment. Tonight's moderator is Areva Martin, civil rights attorney, best-selling author and host of Areva Martin Out Loud on KBLA Talk 1580. We hope you enjoy Agenda for America, an African-American perspective, exclusively on KBLA Talk 1580. Here now, Areva Martin.
Welcome to Agenda for America, an African-American perspective, the state of black women. I am super excited to host this all-star panel of black female leaders. These are change makers. These are the women who are making change throughout this country, making the lives of black people throughout this country better, lifting the black community up. And I am so incredibly honored to be in conversation for not 1, but 2 hours with these powerful sisters. In the first hour of the State of Black Women, I am going to be talking with Dr. Helene Gale. She is the president of the iconic African-American female college, Spelman College. I know I have some HBCU listeners, and you will be so delighted to hear what President Gale has to say about the state of black women and education. I'm also joined in this first hour by my good friend, LaFonza Butler. She is the first African-American woman to be the president and CEO of that powerful Democratic fundraising organization called Emily's List, the organization that's responsible for getting women elected to office. They have an incredible budget, and they do great work all over the country. And also in this hour is Eaton Bridgeman. Eaton is our millennial tonight, so she's going to hold it down for millennials. She is the CEO and owner of the iconic magazine media powerhouse Ebony. Yes, everybody remembers getting their Ebony magazine either at their house or picking it up in a beauty salon, but Eaton Bridgeman is here, and she is taking over the preservation of our history. And then in my second hour, again, superstar women, Dr. Julianne Malvo. She was former president of Bennett College. She's now a dean at Cal State LA. She is one of the country's premier, most influential, noted economist. She's a bad sister. She's written several books. She's a commentator for major news shows, and she's going to help us understand what's happening in this economy as it relates to black women. I'm also joined by Dr. Nita. Dr. Nita was a co-host on the Emmy Award-winning show, The Doctors, 13, 14 years on air, and Dr. Nita was holding it down as the only black female host. I occasionally got to co-host with her, so I'm super excited to be reunited with Dr. Nita. And then joining me in that second hour is April Simpkins. April is the mother of Chelsea Christ, the 2019 Miss USA winner, lawyer, businesswoman, TV host, and correspondent who died by suicide earlier this year. April is going to be sharing her story as a mother and as a mental health advocate. So as you can see, we've got a lot to talk about. So let's jump right in. Welcome, Eaton. Welcome, LaFonza. And welcome, Dr. Gale. All right. I'm going to start by asking each of you for your own opinion about what do you think, or how are you thinking about black women in this moment? Oftentimes the media, the predominantly white run newsrooms and studios tell the stories of black women. But tonight we get to tell our own story. We get to write our own narrative. So I just want to ask you, I'll start with you, LaFonza. If you had to define the state of black women at this moment, how do you do that?
It's a contradiction in some ways, Areva. I think we've got to appreciate both the power and the pain of black women in this moment. as we head, we're just 32 days away from these midterm elections. We know that black women have been disproportionately impacted by the fallout of COVID. We were having to stay at home with our children and do education with them. We were working the best we could and trying to be educators at the same time. Some of us had to deal with losing our jobs and the economic pressure created by a global pandemic. We are still seeing in our communities over-policing and violence, and with the rollback of by the Supreme Court in the Dobbs case of Roe versus Wade, we are also continuing to suffer in the space of maternal health, where black women are disproportionately, I think, 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. And so there is pain in our community. At the same time, we are the most loyal voters at the ballot box. We are the advocates. We are at PTA meetings. We are the champions for our communities, for our church, for our children. And there is incredible power, historic power, that is the black woman in this country. And so to me, it is a moment to recognize both our pain and our power, and to choose as black women how we are going to continue to move, to fight forward for the future that we know our children and our communities deserve.
LaFonza, I love how you juxtapose the two. Yes, we're complex, right? We're not unidimensional. We're multi-layered individuals as black women. We're not monolithic, but I love how you frame the pain and the power at the same time. And Dr. Gale, you are at this historic and iconic university where you get to see up close and personal young women who are just starting out on their journeys, many who are just leaving home for the first time, experiencing independence for the first time. So when you think about the state of black women as a college president, and also as a medical doctor, because I know you're a medical doctor as well, what do you see the state of black women as?
Well, I would say, and thanks so much for having this. I think it's a very timely discussion. In some ways, my comments are similar. I think there's, on one hand, we are seeing black women take their place at the table like never before. And if you look at our vice president, the first black woman Supreme Court justice, in Georgia, we have Stacey Abrams, who we, hope may be the first black woman governor of the state of Georgia, et cetera, et cetera. And so, we're seeing Lisa Cook, who was just made the very first black woman head of on the board of the Federal Reserve Bank. All of these really wonderful first-time women, black women at the table.
Right.
On the other hand, and we see, college rates of, black women attending college, where we used to be less than 10, 20%. If you look at co-ed colleges, black women are eclipsing, male counterparts. On the other hand, as was very aptly said, we also bear the brunt of many of the things of our community. And, whether it is maternal mortality, where black women die at 4 times the rate of white women, or if you look at 65 cents on the dollar in terms of earning capacity, et cetera, black women still bear the brunt, are often the ones who are left to bear the burden and bear the stresses of our community. And so, I think we've got to figure out this duality of, on one hand, the incredible promise. And as you said, I'm at this wonderful institution where I get to see, 2,300 brilliant black women every day who want to change our world, who come in with our average GPA score is 3.9. These are bad sisters who come in and want to change the world. But we also have to think about making sure that they're not changing the world and taking on burdens that lead to, as you said in your next hour, young women who are so successful but then have such challenges that they see their life as being dismal and take their lives. And so, we've got to balance that while we applaud all of the progress we're making sure that we don't continue to have to bear disproportionately the burdens that lead to the kind of challenges that can sometimes be fatal.
Yes, so well said, Dr. Gale. So, Eaton, you are our millennial tonight. And I love this conversation because it's multi-generational. So we have Dr. Gale, and she's in one generation, and then there's LaFonza in the middle, and then there's you, Eaton. And Dr. Gale and LaFonza both reference that maternal mortality rate, the fact that black women in this country are 4 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women, that it's more dangerous as a black woman to give birth in this country than it is to give birth in a third world country. I wonder, and I know, Eden, you are a new mom. Does your generation, are millennial black women, first of all, are they aware of these high maternal mortality rates? And is it in any way impacting their decisions about having children? Are you seeing that amongst millennial women?
Well, I think from my own personal experience, I'd have to say my eyes were definitely opened due to, Serena Williams' story and her being extremely vocal about what all transpired after she gave birth. And, a bit of time later, I was blessed with finding out that I was also pregnant, and that, these were conversations then that I had with my husband, I had with my doctor. I also opted to have a doula in making sure that I had the advocates in the room, making sure that my birthing experience was one that didn't have some of the same issues, that if there were complications, that I was taken serious whenever I were to vocalize, hey, something doesn't feel right, when we know that throughout history, black women with our pain was never really recognized. We were never allowed to have the same level of empathy or sympathy as we had our own challenges. And so I think due to social media, due to black women being unapologetically vocal in ways that maybe previous generations weren't either allowed or didn't feel comfortable, I think that's allowing the next generation of mothers to understand that this is not okay, and that there are options in order for your experience not to be just another statistic. And so I think as a millennial mother, this was something that, yes, I very much had to deal with and make sure I was protected, but also making sure I share that I had a positive birthing experience, and that can be our journey instead of it always being pain when it comes to black women in motherhood.
Yeah, I'm so glad. First of all, congratulations to you, and I'm so happy that you were able to have such a positive birthing experience, and that information is getting out there, because I'm a mother of 3 kids, and to be honest with you, I didn't even know about those horrific maternal mortality rates for black women. I was fortunate. Obviously, I didn't die in childbirth. I didn't have any serious complications with my 3 kids. So I am glad that information is out there. But Eden, you raised Serena Williams, and this causes me, Dr. Gale, to think about a stat that I was reading earlier. And this is the stat about, there's a number out there, or statements that are made that black women are the most educated demographic in our country. So we are like killing it in colleges and graduate schools and, MBAs, law degrees, you name it, black women have it. But there's not a direct correlation, Dr. Gale, between black women gaining this high level of education and that translating into economic power for black women, because we know that black women still earn, by some accounts, either 62 and maybe even as low as 58 cents on the dollar, compared to their white men. And then there's that number that only 2 of the nation's Fortune 500 CEOs, 2 out of 500 companies,
right.
2 black women are sitting at the heads of those companies. So how do we account for black women, highly educated, but yet still making 58 cents, 62 cents, and only 2 black women in these C-suites?
Yeah, well, I think it says that, our gender and our race still has an impact on, which doors we can walk through. And while we can celebrate those who have broken through, for every time someone breaks through, there's somebody else who's set back. Mm. And I think it says we've got to really think about what are the systemic changes that need to happen such that black women aren't constantly going up against barriers that hold them back. And so if you look at, yes, as we all know, educationally, black women continue to move ahead, but when it comes to jobs and the workplace and advancing once they're in the workplace, those are the kinds of barriers that still exist. The poverty rate for African American women is, 30% compared to 11% for white women. And if you kind of go through where we are economically relative to where we are educationally, there's a real disconnect, which says the talent is there, the ability is there, but there's still a system that is holding us back.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned economics because, LaFonza, I just went to my local gas station in Los Angeles and gas was $7 a gallon. And I had to drop $100 on gas. Beginning of the show, you mentioned there were 30 plus days out from the midterms. How do you see economics playing, particularly at the ballot box for black women? When black women go into, their polling places, they go in to cast their vote, what are they going to be thinking about? I imagine many like me are going to be thinking about that $7 we dropped at the gas station on gas. Hopefully that's not the case all over the country. But do you see in the work that you're doing at Emily's List, the black women that you're supporting who are running for office, where is economics playing into the decision making about how black women are likely to vote in the midterms?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. This is an incredibly rich conversation, and I think is a strong display of the strength in our community. Look, I think Areva, you said at the top of the call that we are not monolithic, that we are not single issue, that we are complex, whole people who live whole and complex lives. And so I have no doubt that the state of the economy is going to be top of mind for any number of voters as they head to the ballot box. I have no doubt that the state of healthcare, as we have all been talking, in the spectrum of having full access to healthcare, is going to be top of mind for any number of voters. I have no doubt that, as women go, black women in particular, go into that ballot box, they are going to be carrying with them the memory of someone who they lost during COVID in this pandemic. I have no doubt that they're going to be carrying with them the hopes and the dreams of their children when they go in that ballot box. And I think there is plenty of evidence, Areva, to suggest that there are a lot of women across this country, and men as well, who are going to be going into that ballot box thinking about, what is at stake in this election, and what can their vote do as they cast their ballot. What can their vote do to help to create the country that their children really do deserve? And look, this is going to be an election where fundamental freedom is on the ballot, whether we're talking about reproductive freedom and with access to abortion, or we're talking about voting rights, or we're talking about LGBTQ families, or we're talking about workers' rights. The fundamental freedom to live as whole human beings is going to be on that ballot, and those are the complex issues that voters are going to be carrying in those rooms or discussing at their kitchen table as they're preparing to mail back in their ballot. And there's been so much energy amongst women and women of color, young women in particular, across this country since the Supreme Court made its decision in Dobbs and overturned Roe versus Wade. Whether we're talking about voter registration, activism on college campuses, just today there were more than 60 high schools in 29 states that walked out in protest for their own reproductive freedom. And so I think there's a lot on this ballot. Reproductive freedom is motivating young women and women of color to stand for the future that they want to have themselves. And there's so much that needs to be done to correct, in my opinion, for some of the last 4 years of direction that this country has been on.
And no doubt, and as a civil rights lawyer, LaFonza, I'm right there with you. This notion that forget the $7 I paid for a gallon of gas. We got a lot more at stake in this election than even what happens with respect to our own personal finances. And although people have to care about that, they got to pay their rent, they got to, pay for their car and insurance and other essentials. But when we're talking about our fundamental freedoms and having a democracy where whoever wins an election, people don't storm the Capitol and decide they're going to ignore the will of the people and the votes of the people. So there is so much on the ballot in this midterm coming up. And you know that, LaFonza, as the president of Emily's List, and Dr. Gale knows that as the president of Spelman College, and clearly Eaton as the president, entrepreneur, owner of Ebony knows that. But Eaton, is that message of this election being about our fundamental freedoms, do you think that message is resonating with millennial women, the black women that go to the Ebony website, that chime in on the lifestyle articles, the celebrity articles, and the stuff that Ebony does that is not about politics? Although I know the magazine covers a wide spectrum of topics, but I'm just wondering if the messaging is right for the mom that's working 2 jobs, that's going to school while she's trying to work a job, that's trying to get her kids from daycare to her mama's house for a meal and put them down to bed. Is this message resonating with everyday women in your age group?
I think it is. I think it's always tough for midterm elections. You don't have the same level of weight when you think of a presidential race and kind of all that's going on during that time frame, the media coverage. So I think whenever it's in between that media cycle, I think it can feel almost as if that connection isn't there. But I think it's too much at stake, especially as people understand the federal, local government and kind of who controls what and who can do what that may impact your everyday life. And so making sure that you're paying attention, not just what's happening in Washington, D.C., but also what's happening in your own community. And I think, again, for that generation, whether it's myself or even younger, those that are going to be voting for the first time, they are unapologetically vocal in ways that, all you have to do is go on social media and see. I mean, the level of either anger or saying that I want a different future, and that they are showing it by how they purchase, how they are consuming things. I mean, the millennial and younger generation are mobilizing in a way just completely different, I think, than what most understand, because they see the world differently. We grew up in a time frame where I can say that I remember pre-Facebook, pre-so many things, but so many that are even younger than me, they only know that world. They only know the world now that we have had to adopt into. And so we have to expect that they are going to show up differently, and that they are engaged in a way that is going to be ripple effects on not allowing some of the same either rhetoric or the same outcomes at the polls to happen, just based upon their level of activism and our level of understanding that it really is going to be in our hands. So let's do something about it now, instead of 40 years later in our lives trying to make a difference then.
Yeah, I'm super encouraged, Eaton, to hear that millennial women in particular are angry. As you said, they're mad, and you can tell it in their social media. You can tell it in their actions. Like LaFonza just said, the students walking out of their high schools, women across this country, black women in particular, who we know are the backbone of the Democratic Party, who are the most loyal voters in Democratic primaries and in general elections. Women who we know can make a difference in terms of who gets elected. And I'm glad this message is resonating, that elections do matter. A lot of times millennials, you'll hear some say that, it doesn't matter who's in office, they're all the same. And we have to fight, that tendency. We have to fight those that would try to put Joe Biden in the same sentence as Donald Trump. We know that there is a tremendous difference. We can tell by not just the talk, but the walk, the policies that have been enacted, the actions, the Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Vice President Kamala Harris, all of these black women are in those places and spaces because Joe Biden is not Donald Trump. When we come forward, Agenda for America, an African-American perspective, the state of black women continues with Dr. Helene Gale, LaFonza Butler, and Eaton Bridgeman. Stay with us.
KBLA Talk 1580. We're reimagining radio. Black-owned and operated. An evidence-based alternative for progressive-minded people like you and me. Welcome home, LA. Your new home. Come on. KBLA Talk 1580.
Power to the people.
Let us march on ballot boxes. The men and women will no longer walk the street in search for jobs that do not exist. Let us march on ballot boxes until brotherhood is more than a meaningless word at the end of a prayer, but the first order of business on every legislative agenda. Let us march on ballot boxes until every valley shall be exalted, until every mountain and hill shall be made low, until the rough places are made plain and the crooked places straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. Let us march on ballot boxes until we are able to send to the state houses men who will do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with their God.
Paid for by the African American Voter Registration, Education, and Participation Project.
It's time to represent your neighborhood. It's time to be a voter. When you choose to be a voter, you get to decide what is best for you, your neighborhood, and your family. Use your power. Don't give it away. Have your families back and your neighborhoods back. And make a plan to vote today. Visit plan.lavote.gov. That's plan.lavote.gov to get the info you need to vote in the upcoming November election. That's plan.lavote.gov.
Now arriving, the
okay. Metro's new rail line will connect communities like West Adams, Crenshaw, Baldwin Hills, Leimert Park, and Inglewood. It all opens up Friday, October 7th, and you're invited to celebrate at the grand opening block party featuring food, live performances by local artists, and more. It's all happening at Leimert Park Plaza on Friday, October 7th from noon to 6 p.m. Find out more about the festivities, new stations, and free rides at metro.net/K-Line. KBLA Talk 1580 is the official station of the K-Line.
Welcome back to Agenda for America, an African-American perspective. A national conversation presented by Smiley Audio Media Incorporated, KBLA Talk 1580, and executive produced by Tavis Smiley. Tonight's conversation is the state of black women in America and features an all-star panel of empowering black women who we will rejoin in just a moment. Tonight's moderator is Areva Martin, civil rights attorney, best-selling author and host of Areva Martin Out Loud on KBLA Talk 1580. We hope you're enjoying Agenda for America, an African-American perspective. Here now, Areva Martin.
We are back with Dr. Helene Gale, Eaton Bridgeman, LaFonza Butler. These are women who are leading some of the major institutions in this country. They are breaking those glass ceilings that sometimes feel like they will, just not give way. And Dr. Gale reminded us in the first half that even though black women are making tremendous strides in terms of education, we still have a lot of work to do when it comes to making progress in the workplace. LaFonza, you're a trailblazer. You are the first black woman to head up Emily's List. And for folks that don't know what Emily's List is, this is a powerhouse organization, has raised over $700 million, maybe even close to $1 billion for democratic, pro-choice female candidates around the country. And I know that one of the things you committed to, LaFonza, when you became the first black woman president of this historically white organization, was that you wanted to support more black women candidates. I know we have about 26 black women in Congress now, about 9 black mayors of the top 100 cities. But what else should we be doing to make sure more black women are running and getting elected in both state and federal offices? Because, 26 is okay, but it's like 450 plus folks in Congress, so that's not a whole lot of black women.
Yeah, I love that question, Areva, and thank you so much for asking it. You have, appropriately, I think, and graciously enumerated spaces where there has been incredible success. And I think Dr. Gale mentioned in the top of the conversation that there's still many more places where black women have yet to travail, and in executive office, for example, there has not yet been a black woman elected to serve as a governor in this country, and we have we have an opportunity to change that this midterm. There is not a single black woman in the U.S. Senate since Vice President Kamala Harris ascended to the vice presidency. There is not a black woman in the chamber of the U.S. Senate, the chamber that is sitting and holding so many bills that could actually improve the lives of people and communities all across this country, whether it's conversations and debate about voting rights or the environment or what direction our country should take in terms of child care and paid family leave. There's not a single representation of black women, our lives and our experiences in those debates. And so we have the opportunity to do something about that this year in states in North Carolina with Chief Justice Sherry Beasley and in Florida with Congresswoman Val Demings. We don't have to just settle for one. We can have them both. And do the work that, Congresswoman Karen Bass is running to break yet another glass ceiling as the first black woman to serve as mayor in the city of Los Angeles. There are so many spaces of power that don't yet have the benefit of a black woman being present. And there is work to do, and Emily's List is committed to doing that work, at least for as long as I serve as president. We're going to be committed to doing that work, and doing that work in a way that yes, the historic nature of Emily's List is so incredible, and the work that has been achieved to literally change the face of politics cannot be discounted. And when we still have work to do to ensure that representation is truly representative of this country and of the states and communities up and down the ballot, not just at the federal level,
right,
but in governors' offices, in mayors' mansions, in state legislatures, in state capitol buildings. We have work to do, and we're committed to doing that work, so that every woman can know that Emily's List is their political home. And so we have 32 days left in this midterm, and so much more work to do to ensure that our communities, our journeys, and our lived experiences are truly valued and are a part of the policy making for this country and for our communities.
LaFonso, what do you say to those black women that say, great, Emily's List is there, this is a powerhouse organization, I feel pretty good that I can get a word in to LaFonso and that they're going to be there to support me, but historically we know that black women candidates face different challenges. Some would say more significant challenges. You mentioned the Karen Bass mayoral campaign that's happening now. She is being attacked in the most vicious ways, and we've seen that kind of politics played out on, with respect to a lot of different candidates, the smear campaigns, the ugliness. Kamala Harris, oh my God, my good friend, is the social media attacks on her from black people, from white people, from Russians, from bots. I mean, it's just massive, the kind of attacks that she has had to endure. And then the money piece. I've read some articles, LaFonso, that say that black women don't have access to the same kinds of donors and aren't able to raise the same kind of money as even black male candidates, and definitely not white candidates. So what do you say to that black woman at home who says, yeah, I think I can make a difference, but I don't want to be, 24/7 attacked online or have my physical, presence threatened, my body, my family, my home, and can I raise the money to get me over when I'm up against, like Karen Bass, a billionaire that's spending $100 million to make disparaging commercials about my character and run them 12 an hour.
Yeah, look, it is everything you just said, Areva, that you read is true, and it is, there are studies out there that say that women and women of color, in particular, black women specifically, who are running for office, are disproportionately targeted for campaigns of misinformation and disinformation online. That it is proven. It is a fact. But what do I say to those black women who are like, what do I say to those women? I say to them, Trayvon Martin. I say to them, Breonna Taylor. I say to them, George Floyd. The people who are making decisions about us and the lives, what about our lives is to be valued. I think that they need to be more representative of, again, the experiences that we have, the journeys that we have traveled, and the lives that we have lived. Otherwise, we are giving our power away to people who have no idea what our communities have been through. We're giving our power away to people who have wild, empathetic, and with great desire to be true allies, some of them. We should still make sure that the experiences of black women are in those rooms, at those tables, in every discussion. And, if not us, then who?
No, that is the question. That's the question, Dr. Gale, and I'm sure that's the question you're asking of those 2,300 young women, those minds that you're shaping and molding at Spelman. Are those young women, Dr. Gale, what percentage, if you know, of those women you think are interested and will follow through in terms of running for elected office, whether it's at the school board level or the local level, or even maybe the national level, because that's our pipeline. I would think that Spelman is one place we can look to for our next generation of elected officials.
Well, I think our next generation of leaders, and I think, leaders come in all forms. And one of the things that is so gratifying about being on a campus like Spelman is that there is no one way to be a black woman. You can be a computer geek. You can be a chemistry geek. You can be a social activist. You can be, a literary. You can be an art curator. And so to be in a place where black women feel like there are no limits and I can be whatever I want to be, but I know that I want to change the world. I mean, our motto is a choice to change the world. So these are young women who come in and they are going to be activists in whatever field they go into. And so, what I want to see, I would love to see more young women think about running for office at whatever level it is. But I also want to see young women going into fields like technology and cybersecurity, where, that's where the jobs are going to be. That's where money is going to be. That's where power is going to be. And so I think we have to think about what are the many ways in which we can influence society, whether it's through politics, whether it's in fields that are incredibly lucrative, whether it's continuing to make sure that we're teaching our children and providing them the kind of information that makes sure that their minds are set to go out and do battle in a world that still sees them sometimes as, not being fully part of our society. So, I think it's looking at the holistic picture and recognizing that we've got to make sure that we've got a force that is ready and prepared to take on the big challenges of the world. You look at what's going on in Florida and all of the impact of climate change. We want young women who are thinking about how that's impacting our communities. Environmental justice. Are we thinking about, how our communities are the ones that have toxic substances that lead us to have higher rates of cancers and other chronic diseases? So, I want us to be at all of these tables and making sure that we are preparing young women to take their place across the board.
Yeah, I love what you said, Dr. Gale, is that black women are influencing our society in so many ways. And you named some of the ways that you want to see black women involved in our economy, involved in different industries. And Eaton, you are in a very unique position. You are a woman who has a big seat at a very big table. And you have the privilege to be curating and preserving the history that we are talking about, that black women have made and continue to make. So you're going to be preserving and helping future generations understand the significance of a Ketanji Brown Jackson, of a Kamala Harris, of a LaFonza Butler, and of a Dr. Helene Gale. What are some of the biggest challenges you are facing as this person who has that awesome but pretty Herculean responsibility of curating and preserving our history, because you are in control of Ebony Magazine?
I think for myself, number one, just hearing you state the seat that I'm in, I sit here humbled by that, just that every single day I get to wake up and amplify, celebrate, shout from the rooftops all that our people are doing all around the world to get that type of vantage point and that type of opportunity is something that, as a woman of faith, I very much understand kind of the blessing that I sit in. So number one, I do not take it lightly. Mm-hmm. I understand wholeheartedly that responsibility. And, the challenges really are just our community does amazing things every single day. And so how do I let the world know that, where the challenge is it's just that level of overwhelming. It's not just, we had one person this month that was a ceiling breaker. Every single day across all industries, again, both here in the U.S. and around the world, we are, as we like to say at Ebony, moving Black forward. And so for where I sit and what I hope the team that is behind making Ebony back into not just relevance or not part of the conversation, but leading the conversation, that we link arms with those that are on this call, to those that are listening in, to those that we need to link arms with, to make sure that we shout and we tell our stories, and not allowing Ebony to be that mouthpiece, because for the longest time, the brand represented the best in us. It represented our excellence. It challenged the world to make sure that they saw us as full 360 individuals, not just a monolith that, as what we've talked, that so many times Black women are pushed into, but that we can be mothers, that we can be businesswomen, that we can be everything that our hearts desire. And now I want to make sure I am picking up that torch of those that did that in, I'd say, the pre-Ebony time frame that existed prior to my ownership and leadership, that I lead that same level of engagement on our excellence. So not getting into the salacious and what brings us down, but what unites us, and celebrating that and making sure that we amplify the best of us each and every day. So I sit here excited for the future for Ebony, but excited for our future as a community, and especially as Black women, that I'm going to be able to do what I do because of the greatness that I get to witness every single day.
And that's amazing. And, that you get to follow in the footsteps of, Linda Johnson Rice and her mom, Eunice Johnson, and women who, had the vision to create this space and this place where we get to tell our history. But I wonder, LaFonza, so Eaton says her biggest challenge is how to have enough space to tell all the wonderful stories about all the wonderful things that Black women and Black people are doing. You, LaFonza, are in D.C. You work with candidates. You are, you have your finger on the pulse of what's happening on the grounds, and I don't know that that's being translated. When I look at candidates like Stacey Abrams and Karen Bass and other Black women who have run for office or who are running for office, I don't think the picture that America gets to see is that greatness that Eaton is talking about. Where's the disconnect, and how do we change the images? Because I know I've talked to Karen Bass personally and other Black women who run for office, and they're constantly fighting the "I'm an angry Black woman" narrative or stereotype. So as much as we have accomplished and as many great things as Eaton says comes across her desk that she wants to shout, from the top of the mountaintop as it relates to Black women, we still know that Black women suffer from so many, antiquated and negative stereotypes, and many of those hold them back as they do try to pursue either public office or positions in C-suites. So how do we make sure that this, what Eaton is talking about, gets translated to the rest of the country?
Look, I think it's a lot in the question, and so I want to let me take a bite at it, Areva. The work that I think is so important now, and I think the work that people of Eaton's generation, young people are doing are they are no longer apologetic about having emotions, or call it quote unquote being angry. We talked about black women have a lot to be angry about.
Right.
And we have a lot to be proud of. And we have a lot that needs to be done to create the communities that we know that our children and our neighbors deserve. And so I actually appreciate the trend that is being set by young black women refusing the constraints of those pastime characterizations of what it means to be a black woman, a black leader in the space and in this country. The way that I think candidates are choosing to run, because it is the way that voters respond. It is the way in which voters respond is that they're showing up just as their authentic selves. And I mean, you look at a candidate like Congresswoman Cori Bush from Missouri.
Yes,
from and I know that's your home state, hometown, home girl.
That's the
Not once has she apologized for the pains of being homeless. Not once has she stepped away from or shied from the difficult choices of having an abortion. Not once has she, taken, tried to hide the story of who she is and the journey that she has traveled. And every day she chooses to show up as her whole self with all of those things and be a representative in the United States House of Representatives. And so when we talk about how black women get characterized, I think that gone are the days where we are going to try to transform ourselves to fit someone else's definition of what success looks like or sounds like or walks like or dresses like. I think that we are in the space and in a time where what is required of our leadership, whether in the field of science and technology or space and exploration or entertainment and media or in the space of public service, it is our value and our qualifications are the journeys that we've traveled and the lives that we have lived, and the voices that we carry and the hopes and dreams and pains and struggles that we carry into the rooms in which decisions are being made, and deciding, being very clear about what we are prepared to do about it, and carrying all of that with us, I think, is an important part of the evolution of where we are and how we're showing up.
No, I love that, LaFonza, because I'm thinking about my own journey and starting out as a young lawyer, thinking and feeling constrained by what people's images were of what a lawyer should look like, and trying to fit into that narrative, and being from the Lou, knowing that wasn't me. That was not how I wanted to show up in the world. And just recently, over the summer, I wore cornrows, and I have to say it was the first time ever on television, I work on television a lot, that I went on national television with my hair cornrowed up in a big ass bun, and I felt so liberated. And it is because of Eaton and my daughters, Michael and Morgan, and their generation that, as you said, showed us that we no longer have to twist ourselves into pretzels to fit into a box or to fit into a narrative, and we can show up as our authentic selves. And we should thank now LA County Supervisor, then State Senator Holly Mitchell, and others around the country for their leadership on the Crown Act, which prohibits discrimination in the workplace based on wearing natural hair, so black women can wear cornrows, weaves, wigs, twists, whatever, and we cannot be discriminated against. So I am happy to hear that we are showing up in those ways. And Dr. Gale, I'll give you the last question. Again, young women in Spelman. These women, dynamic. I have so many good friends who graduated from Spelman who are so loyal to the school and who just love the institution. Those women, what do they see as the state of black women and the future? Are they optimistic that some of these health statistics we're going to turn around, and some of these economic and wage disparities, we are going to turn those around?
Yeah, well, they are, and I'll just bridge from the last comments. I think the fact that this generation is totally unapologetic about who they are means that I think that when they go out into the world, they will not necessarily carry some of the same burdens that we did. And you talked about, your hair as an example, and just not feeling constrained and feeling like you had to be a certain way. And I think that will unleash a lot of power. I think it will also allow help with some of the mental health challenges that we have seen, where, if young women, first of all, believe that they have the right to be themselves, exercise that right, I think there's such power in that. And so what I see on our campus are young women who made the choice to come to a place like Spelman, many of them who could have gone to many other schools. We just had a show on not too long ago that featured two young women who were accepted to all the Ivies and, elite schools, and said they wanted to come to a place where they would be nurtured for who they are, and where their culture, their history, their families was the norm. And I think when you have that kind of grounding, you can then go out and face the world in a different way. And so, everybody's not going to come to Spelman, everybody's not going to go to an HBCU, but I think we as black people have the responsibility to make sure that our young people have that sense of grounding, have that sense that they can be their authentic selves, so they can go out into the world and feel like they can, that they can be change agents.
Right.
And that's what I want for all young black women, to have that opportunity to know themselves, be themselves, and then go out there and make their mark on the world.
Well, that is an incredible way for us to wrap up this conversation. I want to thank you, Eaton. Thank you, LaFonza. Thank you, Dr. Gale. Powerful, powerful women, change makers, breaking glass ceilings, setting an example, setting the bar high, and just kicking ass. Let's just be real about it. Let's just keep it really real. Again, thank you so much for joining in this conversation on State of Black Women, an agenda for America, an African-American perspective. When we come forward, our second hour, 3 more powerhouse women, Dr. Julianne Malvo, April Simpkins, and Dr. Nita. We continue the conversation, State of Black Women in America.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Power to the people. If Black Lives Matter, make black votes count. Vote by November 8th. Long lines, voter roll purges, voter identification laws, voter intimidation, felony disenfranchisement, polling place closures, early voting limitations, partisan redistricting, partisan Supreme Court rulings, invalidation of the Voting Rights Act. Vote on or by November 8th. If Black Lives Matter, make black votes count. Tamir Rice, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Heather Heyer, Emmett Till, Medgar Evers, Jimmy Lee Jackson, Fred Hampton, Schwerner, Goodman, and Cheney, Viola, Louisu, Fannie Lou Hamer, John Lewis. They rest in power. Make their memory in power when you vote on or by November 8th. If you believe Black Lives Matter, then make black votes count.
Paid for by the African American Voter Registration, Education, and Participation Project.
It's time to represent your neighborhood. It's time to be a voter. When you choose to be a voter, you get to decide what is best for you, your neighborhood, and your family. Use your power. Don't give it away. Have your families back and your neighborhoods back. And make a plan to vote today. Visit plan.lavote.gov. That's plan.lavote.gov to get the info you need to vote in the upcoming November election. That's plan.lavote.gov.
Now arriving, the K. Metro's new rail line will connect communities like West Adams, Crenshaw, Baldwin Hills, Lamert Park, and Inglewood. It all opens up Friday, October 7th, and you're invited to celebrate at the grand opening block party featuring food, live performances by local artists, and more. It's all happening at Lamert Park Plaza on Friday, October 7th from noon to 6 p.m. Find out more about the festivities, new stations, and free rides at metro.net/K-Line. KBLA Talk 1580 is the official station of the K-Line.
Welcome back to Agenda for America, an African American perspective, a national conversation presented by Smiley Audio Media Incorporated, KBLA Talk 1580, and executive produced by Tavis Smiley. Tonight's conversation is the state of black women in America and features an all-star panel of empowering black women who you will meet in just a moment. Tonight's moderator is Areva Martin, civil rights attorney, best-selling author and host of Areva Martin Out Loud on KBLA Talk 1580. We hope you're enjoying Agenda for America, an African-American perspective, exclusively on KBLA Talk 1580. Here now, Areva Martin.
If you joined us in the first hour, you heard three incredibly dynamic women talk about the state of black women. And this is an Agenda for America, an African-American perspective. And you really can't have a conversation in 2022 about the state of black women if we don't talk about health, our physical health and our mental health. At the top of this hour, I am so incredibly grateful to be joined by mental health advocate April Simpkins. She is the mother of the former Miss USA, Chelsea Christ. I'm also joined by Dr. Nita. She is a former host of the Emmy Award-winning talk show, The Doctors. She's also the author of a new book called Crash Course for Women, Better Sex, Better Health, Better You. Later in this hour, we'll also be joined by noted economist, former president of Bennett College, current dean of Cal State LA, Dr. Julianne Malvo. Welcome, April. Welcome, Dr. Nita.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to start by saying that no mother should ever, ever, ever have to bury her daughter. No mother should ever have to feel the pain and the grief of losing a child. I'm the mother of 3 kids, 2 daughters, 2 beautiful black young women that I just adore, who I'm best friends with, who I'm just madly in love with. I'll just, keep it real. But my guest tonight, April Simpkins, she had to endure the pain of losing her second oldest child, her best friend, her ride or die, her beautiful, and I do mean beautiful, inside and out daughter, accomplished attorney, not just a JD, but a JD MBA. So few black women in this country have that joint degree. TV correspondent for Extra. Miss USA. How many black women have been a beauty pageant winner? So few in our history. Beautiful, beautiful Chelsea Christ. We lost her in January of this year. First of all, April, my heart, my prayers, everything that I am as a Black woman just goes out to you and your family. I want to start this conversation by asking, how did you navigate the grief and the horrors of finding out that your beautiful daughter, Chelsea, was no longer with us?
I feel like I'm still navigating that, quite truthfully. It's been a long journey. There have been very difficult moments and moments when I felt like I was being washed over with peace. Chesley had battled with depression for many, many years. And, it was something I knew, something people in her close circle knew, people she felt safe talking about it with. We all knew. But, Chesley had been doing a lot of things that were right to take care of her mental health. And when things were getting to a place where she was not okay, is when she began to hide it. Interestingly enough, so many people reach out to me and talk to me about how Chesley touched them, and she saw her, they saw her on TV where she was bubbly, and there were moments and times, of course, when she was joyful, and that was a strong part of her personality. But one thing that I want to add is that showing up in that way was part of the uniform of her job. And as an entertainment correspondent, you don't have the luxury of showing up at work and all through work wearing a certain face that does not portray happiness and encourage others to engage in conversation. And so, that was a public Chesley. The private Chesley struggled, and I knew of that struggle. It was a shock to us when she passed away. And even the way that we were notified, and I think what felt surreal, Areva, was I just talked with her, Friday, Saturday, and I find myself several days later going to pick out a casket for my daughter and some place to lay her to rest. And so, and then still kind of managing all of the news and speculation and comments that were coming in, took my mental health. It tested my mental health to the core. I've been fortunate to have worked with an amazing therapist for many, many, many years. And so, we began meeting more frequently. And there were a number of things I did that, there's no guidebook that says if your child passes away after a long battle with depression, here's how to maneuver. And so I felt like I was finding a path with, with the lights off is what it felt like, and not really knowing where the road was, but knowing it was there. And I tell you, it was a challenge. It was a strong challenge, and not feeling guilty when I did have a good day. I remember the first time I really laughed after she passed, and I did feel guilty, because how could I be enjoying any part of my life when my baby's not here? And managing through that became a process. So many emotions, so many things that I felt. But I think it takes people around you to support you. The number of people who've told me they're praying for me, and even the people who haven't said so, but I know they are, those prayers have sustained me. I firmly believe that. Yeah. I firmly believe they carried me and my family.
Yeah, Chesley, just a beautiful name, beautiful person, so accomplished. And I read an interview, April, that you gave a little while ago, and you said, you used the term high-functioning depression, and you said many people think that depression means someone is stuck in the bed, stuck in the house. They can't get up. They can't move about, the world. They can't go to work. They're not functioning. But Dr. Nita, we know that depression takes many forms. What would you say, Dr. Nita, to any young woman that's listening to April's courageous story? And you are incredibly courageous, April, to share your story with us. And I, again, so grateful that you're willing to do it with us this evening. But Dr. Nita, what would you say to some woman that may be out there listening to this and feeling like they're doing that they're walking, just going through the motions. They're showing up at work. They're smiling. They're laughing. They're going out with their girlfriends. But in their silent moments, they're suffering.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you stated, I do want to thank April for sharing this story because I know it's helping so many people. Because a lot of people aren't vocal about their struggles with mental health. And I want to say we need to ask why. Why is it that someone may be listening to this and they may be unwilling to reach out for the help that they need and deserve? Particularly in the African American community, we as a whole are very reluctant to reach out when we need assistance when it comes to mental health. And of course, everybody's story is different. So I'm just talking about the African American community in general and what I as a physician. But the thing is, no one is born believing that mental health issues should be stigmatized. We're taught that mental health issues are stigmatized. And we have to change that conversation. We have to break that toxic cycle. So the way that you do that is you have conversations such as these, and when people are vocal about what they're going through, it makes other people feel less alone. And I think it's important that we begin to encourage equality between physical and mental health, because if someone has diabetes or they have high blood pressure, no one would make, these types of comments towards them. But if someone is having a mental health issue, then that stigma is there. And once again, the reason that stigma is there is because that's the narrative that we've shaped in this country. We've taught people that that's the way it's supposed to be, when nothing could be further from the truth. So I think we have to choose empowerment over shame.
Right.
We have to let people know that we are here to support them. And just like diabetes is a medical issue, like that can be treated, we also have to look at these mental health issues in that light. And we have to just make sure that we're having open, honest conversations, and we're making sure that we are letting people know all the resources that are available to them so that they can live healthier, happier lives.
So, April, I'll ask you, did you grow up in a community like the one Dr. Nita just described, where it was taboo or stigmatized to talk about mental health? I know so many in my own Black community that I grew up in, it was a sign of weakness to admit that you were having some kind of, emotional issue, or that you maybe needed to talk to someone, or that you needed help. And then there's the whole religious piece. So many Black folks are told, just pray on it, just let God, give it to God, take it to the altar and leave it with God. And if you are having an issue, it's because you're not praying hard enough, or maybe you're praying on Monday and on Sunday you're going to the club. So, there are all these mixed messages, these wives' urban tales about mental health. Was that a part of your upbringing, April?
No, interestingly enough, mental health was not stigmatized when I was growing up, but it also wasn't a topic of discussion when I was growing up. I grew up with a single mom, and I could see her strength. I could hear her as a child crying over worry. Just, she was it. If she lost her job, we all didn't eat and could potentially be home insecure. So enter into the space, the strong Black woman syndrome, where you feel internally like you have to suck it up, and you have our community telling you, you got to just suck it up and plow forward.
Mm-hmm.
And taking care of your mental health almost became a luxury, not a necessity. And, you know, as I grew older and understood a lot more about the value of having a counselor, that is when I began to really focus on my mental health. And that has been an open topic of discussion in our family. Seeing a counselor is almost an expectation like getting a physical. Like it's just part of the conversation in our household. But growing up, it just wasn't a topic that was shared. Now, my mom was part of the community that felt like, you know, if you're having difficulties, you need to pray on it. And, you know, statistically, Black women make up a larger portion of the church in our Black communities,
right,
and are most likely to turn to our faith in times of crisis. But, you know, I've been very vocal. Chesley's walk with God came into question after she passed, and we worked very hard to dispel those myths. Anyone who knew Chesley knew she had a very strong faith.
Right.
And I have been a very vocal advocate that you can have Jesus and a therapist too.
Hello.
Both,
Hello.
You can have both. And she did. And so, you know, I'm working really hard to be as an advocate to keep that message in the forefront, especially in our community.
Yeah, that's so important. They are not mutually exclusive. I like to tell folks, Dr. Nita, that it's God that, you know, gave the smarts to people like Dr. Nita so that they could become doctors and so that they could help people, that they could serve people, that, you know, a doctor is an extension of God, an extension of that service that, you know, we get, you know, because of our faith. Dr. Nita, we're seeing these incredible increases of death by suicide amongst African Americans, particularly young women. I've read so much about what is causing it. Sometimes, you know, folks point to racial, you know, just discrimination, the stress that Black women face because of racial trauma, economic trauma. So there are a lot of different factors. But what is it that we as a community and Black women in particular, you think we should be on the lookout for? You know, what are the things? Because I often hear people like April who have had someone in their family die by suicide. They blame themselves often and say, I should have noticed this, or I should have recognized this, or I should have done something to intervene. Are there things that we should know that could be warning signs? And you know, what do you say to a mom who has tried to intervene, but they have an adult child that they can't force into treatment or can't force to get help?
Some of the warning signs for depression include, but are not limited to, having a hopeless outlook. If the person is losing interest in things they were once interested in, increased fatigue or sleep problems, an increase in anxiety. Some people may notice a change in their appetite and weight or uncontrolled emotions. And so just looking for changes in behavior and looking for problems with concentration and things like that. I would say one thing that is a myth is that if you think someone is depressed, a lot of people think that if they ask the person, are you thinking about suicide, that would then some way prompt the person to start thinking about suicide, but they weren't thinking about it before. But that's not true. If you are concerned that someone in your life is depressed, it is important that you ask them if they are thinking about suicide, and you can ask them if they have plans. And I think but it's also important to note what you ladies were talking about earlier, like high functioning depression. Not everyone is just going to be in bed all day, or not, you know, and not everyone is going to not brush their teeth or comb their hair. You know, you can be high functioning. So you want to intervene in any situation, but definitely if you think that they are contemplating suicide, you want to ask them, and you want to do your best to support them and let them know that you are there for them. And if they are reluctant to seek help for some reason, for example, if they believe that needing help with mental health somehow makes them weak, then you want to, correct that thought process. You want to let them know that they deserve to have help, and you just want to guide them to the appropriate resources. And I would say, once again, going back to just my general experience, a lot of times individuals in the African American community are reluctant to get therapy, and they're definitely reluctant to take medication if it's needed. And I'm not saying that medication is always needed, but I think it's important to have a complete evaluation and be open to hearing what the healthcare professional recommends and then proceeding accordingly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I think it's so important that we talk about family members who may want to be of help and don't know how to help. So thank you for correcting that myth that somehow by asking someone if they are suicidal, that will make them suicidal. That doesn't make them suicidal. And you said we should ask, and we should ask if they have a plan, because that is our cue to intervene. April, I read someplace that Chesley had contemplated or perhaps even attempted suicide in her early 20s. And I also read that she was concerned about aging. And again, correct me if what I read is incorrect, because a lot of stuff that we read is not accurate. So are either of those things that I read accurate?
Yes, Chesley did attempt suicide when she was in her early 20s. And that is when she and I grew very, very close. And while I didn't know a lot at that time how to support someone who is battling depression, I learned very, very quickly. And when I say Chesley and I could talk about anything, I mean, we could talk about anything. She knew that when we had conversations, it was completely a judgment-free zone. And in our family, because we knew that attempt existed, conversations around mental health and suicide was common. So, things weren't off the table. After Chesley passed in January, our whole family was together and met with a psychologist as a family, and then began grief counseling, and we did grief counseling session as a family so that we would learn how to put our own emotions and what we're feeling out into the air around grieving, and would understand from one another what we needed, what we're looking for, and that was tremendous for our family to do that together. And then some of us continued with grief counseling or seeing a counselor for a few reasons. One, because we all felt an enormous sense of grief, but two, because we learned a valuable lesson about being vocal regarding your mental health. And one thing that I do want to add when it comes to talking to someone, because that's so important to have a person that you can share with when you're having feelings of doubt, uncertainty, hopelessness, sadness. We need to learn how to be a safe place for someone to share that, to feel that they can share their feelings truthfully without judgment, without fear that it's going to be repeated, without fear that they won't be recognized, going through a conversation of dismissal or telling someone, it'll get better and hang in there. You really need to learn as an individual, everyone should, how to be that safe place so that when someone or should someone open up, to Dr. Nita's point, how to, either refer them to someone for help, or work with them to get help.
Yeah, no, that's so important, being that safe space, that judgment-free zone. We live in a society where there is so much judgment. And women in particular, Dr. Nita, feel an enormous amount of judgment. And now it's not just from the people you encounter, it's from hundreds of thousands, if not millions of strangers that you encounter online, who judge you, who attack you, who ridicule you. How much of that do you think is playing into some of these these stats that say so much of the country feels like they have some kind of mental health issue, and this rise that we're seeing in suicide amongst African Americans, this culture that we live in where, nothing's private, and you put yourself out there, and particularly someone like Chesley, who her whole life was public. She was a TV correspondent. She had a big TikTok following. She had a big social media following. How dangerous is that, Dr. Nita, when those of us who live in the public, that kind of pressure that we are subjected to by strangers?
Oh, I think it is. It's very hard, and you know that, Areva. It's very difficult. And I don't think that it's only difficult for people in the public eye. I think it's difficult for everybody, especially our younger people, when you are looking at someone's quote-unquote highlight reel. We've been there. You go to a function, and you see this person, and they take 65. They're not enjoying the function, but they take like 65 pictures of something at the party or the get-together. Then they post this one picture, and it's like #having a blast.
Right.
And then
living my best life.
Home, and you're looking around, you're like, oh, we have to start the party because you have been in the park 45 minutes. But that's a great picture. And then you have this person at home, and they're looking at that picture, and they're like, I didn't get invited. Or, oh, my gosh, look at their outfit. They're having all this fun. And it's very, very difficult in this day and age. But I also want to point out, I love what you said, April, about making sure that you're a safe space. But I think it's also important to realize when you've done as much as you can do for that person. When it's to out for professional help. And to circle back to a question you asked a little earlier, Areva, if you want to help a friend or a family member and they're not ready to get help, one thing you may be able to do is maybe you can reach out to a therapist and not to tell their story, but to say, hey, I'm in a situation and this is what's going on. I really want to help this person, my friend or family member. How can I best do that? So maybe if you're not ready, maybe you can kind of go for them, get a little advice, and to see how you can help them, how you can be most supportive.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, because there's so much guilt that those of us who want to help people who we see in crisis, whether it's a family member or a friend, and we need to process that guilt that we may be carrying as we're trying to get some help for that individual. This is such an important conversation, and I just want anyone that's listening to know that there is help out there. There are trained professionals in every community in this country that can provide help, and we're going to give a hotline for those who may be experiencing some feelings of depression. When we come forward, we're going to continue this conversation, the state of Black women, with Dr. Nita April Simpkins, and Dr. Julianne Malvo will be joining us.
Unapologetically provocative.
Unapologetically bold.
Unapologetically erotic. Unapologetically progressive.
We've got you covered.
This is LA's new home for Smart Dialogue. KBLA Talk 1580.
Power to the people.
Say his name. 12-year-old Ohio youth Tamir Rice was gunned down at a public park while playing with a toy gun, a mere 12 seconds after police arrived on the scene in 2014. No one was ever prosecuted. Justice for Tamir denied. Say his name. Tamir Rice. Tamir would have been 20 on June 25th. He'd be able to cast a ballot for only the second time in a national election this November. Say his name, Tamir Rice. Tamir can't vote on November 8th. His voice was silenced long before he was ever able to vote. Do you think those who denied him justice will vote? Say his name, Tamir Rice, and vote on or by November 8th. What's your excuse?
Paid for by the African American Voter Registration Education and Participation Project.
It's time to represent your neighborhood. It's time to be a voter. When you choose to be a voter, you get to decide what is best for you, your neighborhood, and your family. Use your power. Don't give it away. Have your families back and your neighborhoods back. And make a plan to vote today. Visit plan.lavote.gov. That's plan.lavote.gov to get the info you need to vote in the upcoming November election. That's plan.lavote.gov.
Now arriving, the K. Metro's new rail line will connect communities like West Adams, Crenshaw, Baldwin Hills, Leimert Park, and Inglewood. It all opens up Friday, October 7th, and you're invited to celebrate at the grand opening block party featuring food, live performances by local artists, and more. It's all happening at Leimert Park Plaza on Friday, October 7th from noon to 6 p.m. Find out more about the festivities, new stations, and free rides at metro.net/K-Line. KBLA Talk 1580 is the official station of the K-Line.
Welcome back to Agenda for America, an African American perspective, a national conversation presented by Smiley Audio Media Incorporated, KBLA Talk 1580, and executive produced by Tavis Smiley. Tonight's conversation is the state of black women in America and features an all-star panel of empowering black women who we will rejoin in just a moment. Tonight's moderator is Areva Martin, civil rights attorney, best-selling author and host of Areva Martin Out Loud on KBLA Talk 1580. We hope you're enjoying Agenda for America, an African American perspective. Here now, Areva Martin.
I'm speaking with Dr. Nita April Simpkins, and Dr. Julianne Malvo is going to join the conversation. Dr. Nita, we have been talking about mental health issues and the rising number of black women in particular who have died by suicide, but black women suffer from so many other health-related issues unrelated to their mental health, their physical health. I read a stat that says 46% of African-American women over 20 years old have hypertension. And another statistic that said while white women are more likely to have breast cancer, African-American women have higher mortality rates from breast cancer. What is the state of black women's physical health? I mean, it just feels like we're still, at the top of all of these bad lists as it relates to our health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would describe the state of black women's health as inappropriate and unnecessarily suboptimal. And I know that sounds great, but that is what to describe it. Yeah.
Suboptimal. Break that down for us. That's a big old word, Dr. Nita. What do you mean when you say suboptimal?
I mean, we don't have to be at the top of all of these horrible lists. Like you were saying, when we look at black women's health, we have a higher prevalence of many health conditions, which include but are not limited to heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, maternal morbidities, obesity. And so we're at the top of all of these lists, but the question is, why? And do we really have to be at the top of all of them?
Okay, so tell us how we can change that so that we're not at the top. Yeah, we don't have to be. If you're telling us that, it's not in our DNA, right? There's nothing genetically about black women that causes us to be at the top of these lists. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that, genetics is always going to play a role in things, but this idea that it's all about genetics, it's not true. It's not true. And it's very important that we take into consideration all of the contributing factors, such as, the chronic conditions, structural racism, implicit bias. When we look at just overall economic, physical, and emotional health, all of those things are intertwined. And to say that, oh, it's just that genetically you have a higher probability of high blood pressure or diabetes, like that's not the whole story. And we have to stop pretending as though it is, or otherwise Black women will continue to die at unnecessarily high rates.
Yeah, I know your new book is a crash course for women about better sex, better health, better you. We'll talk a little about the better sex, but before we do, let's talk about the better health. What should we be saying? Everybody wants to talk about sex, but we're talking about health first. What should we be doing to just make our health better? The structural racism, obviously, that's so big, and that's something we have to tackle as a country. That's not something individually any of us can dismantle. But is there a part of this better health that we do control, that we can take charge of?
Absolutely. I would say, first of all, use reputable resources to educate yourself as much as possible. I wish we lived in a world where you could just walk into a doctor's office and they would just lay all of the information out for you and everything would be fine, and they paint a clear picture for what you needed to do. But unfortunately, the way the healthcare system is set up, we all know that many doctors are rushed, and you don't always get all of the information you need at a doctor's appointment. So when I say reputable resources, I like sources like Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic. I feel that those sites give science-based information, and the information is presented in a way that's easy for readers to understand. So you walk in, I'm not saying you have to walk in as, a doctor. Like you need to know all things, but at least walk in with as much knowledge as you can have. It's just going to be beneficial. Secondly, I would say advocate for yourself. And when you advocate for yourself, I want to apologize for having to say this because it embarrasses me as a doctor, honestly. But when you advocate for yourself, in a lot of cases, expect a little pushback. It may not always, your questions may not always be welcome. But then you have to say, okay, am I just going to allow my questions, comments, and concerns to be dismissed? Or am I going to advocate for my health?
Right.
Because in some instances, like if your doctor isn't listening to your concerns, then they're not getting the whole picture and you're not going to get the right diagnosis. And as a result, you're not getting the right treatment. And what does that mean for your overall health?
Right. And April, you've stepped into this advocacy space, and Dr. Nita is saying when you step into that advocacy space, you should expect to receive some pushback because some people don't like advocates. They don't like folks who push the envelope, right? Who ask the tough questions, who raise issues. Are you experiencing any of that? I mean, have you had that occasion where you're trying to set the record straight about the issue of mental health or whatever issue, and you're facing some of that, pushback?
It hasn't been terrible, and I say that primarily because there's so many people, Areva, like yourself, who have empathy. And so I don't think there's a lot of pushback, not right now. I don't doubt that as I continue to step into this space and perhaps step on a few toes, that there will be some pushback. And, Dr. Nita, I love what you said about physical health and challenging your doctor, because that is something that I firmly believe in. I don't know why we as Black women aren't showing up that way in pressing our health. I have been a runner for quite some time. I've done the New York Marathon at least twice, and continue to run races. I strength train. And I think, and the reason I bring that up is because then when I discuss that with other women, I hear the pushback. Why would you do that? That's too hard. I'm not running unless something's chasing me. Why would you listen? And it just goes on. It feels like we make excuses for ourselves when, in my opinion, your physical health and your mental health are connected. And when you do take care of your physical self, you are also taking care of your mental health.
No, that is absolutely true. I am a runner. I can't say I've run the New York Marathon, April girlfriend, but I have done a couple of half marathons. I've not actually done a whole marathon. Dr. Julianne Malveaux is here. And Dr. Malveaux, you were the president of Bennett College, an all-women's college. So you saw young women who were dealing with a lot of the stressors we're talking about. Dr. Nita, talked about being on social media and seeing you're not invited to the party, and it looks like they are living their best lives, and they're all decked out in their best outfits. They got their Gucci bag and their red bottoms on. That's a lot of pressure for young women. How did you see those young women when you were at Bennett College respond to and deal with that level of pressure?
Well, Areva, that's a really great question. One of the things we did, we just had to create support groups around campus. I had a psychiatrist friend come down to campus and just go into the dorms and talk to people. And she said, black women, young black women are having mental health issues. The comparative thing, everybody wants to be a star. Some folks are chronicling their life minute by minute on the social media, while others are trying to study, which is what I told them they needed to do to get out of school. And then they also have a whole other set of pressures. If they're first generation, everybody in their circle is not supporting them. And that's challenging. You go home, you've been at Bennett or another college, you go home, the hood rats are not necessarily in your corner. They want you to hang out again, they want you to smoke a little weed, et cetera, and you're trying to stay on the straight and narrow. It's peer pressure. So we have to create safe spaces for our girls. I'm here, at this, receiving an award from the Pathfinders, and this is an organization, Pathmakers, that's helping young women transition from high school to college and beyond. And we have to have many more programs like that to affirm our young women. And the other thing we must do is teach them financial literacy, because in this everybody want to have everything right now kind of world, you mentioned red bottom. Nobody with an income of less than $100,000 a year needs a red bottom. I'm just saying.
Preach, Dr. Malveaux.
If you have one, I'm going to know what else you're doing. Do you own your home? Because this sort of, but so many young women, Areva, let me tell you, the 5 years I was at Bennett, every May when we had graduation, this is kind of illegal, but I would go through the records to find out what my young ladies owed. Because you had to be able, there's a certain loan limit, but if you went beyond the loan limit, the president had to sign. I had young ladies who owed $60,000 and $70,000, and it wasn't just because of their own expenses. Many of them, first generation, were taking out loans to help their families.
Right.
I had one child, I got in trouble for this one. She wanted to take out $20,000 more. I said, oh, hell no. Wow. And then I finally said, well, why do you need to take all that money? She said, to bail her daddy out of jail. I said, well, what he's in jail for? She said, drugs. I said, how many times have he been in? She said, 6. I said, well, let him stay then, because he going to go get it. And then you go owe even more money. So, of course, I did get in trouble for that. They think your mouth will get you in trouble. But the point is that so many of these young sisters are having family pressure to take out more loans, but then they have to pay it back.
Yeah.
A loan is not a gift, but the language of higher education, if you take out more loans than you need, they give you a check. And some people call it a refund check, but it's not a refund. What I call is net loan proceeds. And I tried to make my financial aid people use that net loan proceeds. You took out a loan, you got some money back. It's not a refund.
Right.
A refund is like, but a lot of financial literacy is connected to the mental health, because when people feel like they need to spend to keep up with, Tanika, so you feel like you have to have the same amount of money. No, you don't. Learn to live with what you got.
I love that, and I think we should put that in a frame on the wall. If you don't make $100,000, don't walk up in any room with some red bottoms on. Okay, that was said by Dr. Julianne Malveaux right here on the state of black women. You raised such a good point, Dr. Malveaux, about financial literacy, and we can't talk about financial literacy without talking about the fact that women, particularly black women in this country, still earn as little as 62, maybe even 58 cents on the dollar as compared to white men. And Dr. Nita, I saw a study that said that even physicians, female physicians, earn $2 million less over the course of their careers than male physicians. So we're talking about our mental health. Of course we're stressed out if we're making less money and working hard, if not harder, than our male counterparts. How are your female doctors, Dr. Nita, how did they respond? You saw that study that came out about that $2 million deficit. What was the response amongst black women physicians in your circle?
Well, I can tell you this, Areva, we didn't like it, but we were not surprised by it, and it all goes back to advocating for yourself. I'll be honest with you. There have been situations where I've been called by individuals to work at hospitals or what have you, and I was just honest. I would say, I don't work for that. Mm-hmm. I know you're busy, I'm busy, because I know that they were not calling my white male counterparts, my colleagues, and offering them that amount of money. I know they weren't doing it. And the reason I know they weren't doing it is because I've seen the studies, and also because I have a relationship with some of them, and they tell me what they offer them. So it's insulting, and it's unfair, and it's just another fight that we have to continue to move through until there is equality there.
Yeah, the stress.
Go
ahead, Dr. Melvin.
Areva, let me quick back to say this: the most powerful phrase in the English language when you're negotiating where salary is that all? With some of the studies that we have in human resource suggest that black women in particular are more likely to take the first offer that's given to them, whereas white men are most likely to bargain.
Right.
So, sister gets offered $100,000. She's like, oh, I'm going to Disneyland. White boy gets offered $100,000. He's like, is that all?
Is that all?
And so incorporate that into your language. Is that all? And, oftentimes the offer will be upped. You say, is that all? Like, it's interesting, but you got to give me some more money. Yeah. And oftentimes that does happen. But we have not been trained, as the sister just said, to advocate for ourselves. We have not been trained to stand up for ourselves. Oftentimes we're too shy to say, look, I am worth this much money. Give it up, or I got something else to do. Yeah. And we should never allow desperation to cause us to cut and paste ourselves to be less than who we were ordained to be.
That's absolutely correct. We got to know our worth. And, there's a saying, know your worth and put a tax on it. Add something to that amount. In addition to knowing our worth and demanding it, standing in our purpose and demanding our worth, we also have to train folks to respect us as black women, respect our expertise, respect our knowledge, respect our lived experiences, because all too often, like you said, Dr. Nita, people expect black women to do things for cheap, on the cheap, and sometimes just downright free, that they would never ask a man to do. I can think of many situations where, again, I've been offered, whether it's a speaking engagement or a contractual arrangement, and I've had to wonder, is this the same amount that was offered? And in that advocacy for myself, having, standing up for myself and asking that question, April, you are the mother, you have daughters. How are you teaching your daughters to be able to do what we're talking about, to stand in their truths, know their value, know their worth, and demand it? How do you do that as a mom, a black mother?
It's interesting that you bring that point, because I have been an entrepreneur for the better part of my adult life. Created a company from scratch. My children watched me do that at a card table in my bedroom, and grew that to a company so large that I actually sold it and still have my second company, which is a recruiting company. So the conversation around fighting for your worth has been a part of our dialogue for years. And I say to my daughters, you are not just negotiating on the actual work you will do, but you need to add on to that for the nonsense you'll have to put up with.
Right.
The microaggressions, the times you want to speak up, but didn't because you knew as a black woman, if you spoke up in that moment, what it would mean or what it might cost you. You need to add for that.
Right.
And they knew how to advocate for themselves, both of my daughters. My oldest daughter, Paige, has her own salon here in Charlotte, which is a very successful business. So she is accustomed to pushing back and speaking her mind and talking about what she needs for her business. And Chesley was absolutely no different, did not have a problem speaking up for herself.
So Dr. Malvo, first of all, let me just say this, April, kudos to you. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've worked for myself pretty much my entire career, and I have done the same with my two daughters that you are doing with your daughter, Paige, and what you did with Chesley is teaching them that they have to be able to speak up for themselves and not let the workplace or people in the workplace intimidate them. Are you seeing, Dr. Malvo, so you were at Bennett College, now you're at Cal State LA, you're dean there, so you're seeing another group of students. Are you seeing that young women are getting this message? Because our generation of women, like we were taught in many ways to just keep our head down, do the work, be quiet, not make a big fuss, not make any noise. Those on this state of black, women, we didn't follow those rules. We spoke up, we used our voices, but we do know a lot of our peers aren't comfortable in those spaces. But are you seeing a difference, Dr. Malvo, in this generation of women on college campuses?
Yes and no. I mean, on one hand, especially when they're first generation students often are just happy to be in college. They don't know the rules. They don't know stuff like graduate fellowships, travel abroad, and often when they're presented with opportunities, they're a little bit afraid to take those opportunities. At the same time, there is a cohort who are not only ready to speak up for themselves, but in my opinion, sometimes speak up a little too much. In other words, if you are an intern, you're not going to run the company. And so, I've had interns come into my office and say, well, this is how you need to do it. I'm like, no, what you need to do is listen and learn. So there is among young people, I think, something of a sense of entitlement, but at the same time, I think there's also a fear going on. And with what's going on in our economy right now, it has made our young people fearful.
Yes.
One of the studies that we see, Areva, suggests that our young people who are between 18 and 25 are not going to do as well economically as their parents have done. This may be one of the first times in history that the next generation does worse than the prior generation. Usually you see upward mobility. But, thank you, Brother Biden, for the student loan forgiveness, but it's not enough. It's a drop in the bucket. The unemployment rate for black women in particular is 5.8%, while for overall it's 3.6%, and for white women it's about 2%. So, we basically, young black women are scared. And oftentimes that dictates how they show up in the world in terms of negotiating for themselves, standing up for themselves, and all of that. I mean, I got the lesson. I mean, my mother was a lovely, lovely, lovely lady, but she always, don't. She said the tall nail is going to get knocked down. Well, I was a tall nail and I got knocked down, and I'm still here. But a lot of our young people didn't get that message, or they've learned to be fearful.
Right.
And we have to empower them. We sisters who are seasoned and who've been through the storm, we have to empower them and help them stand in their greatness, because they are great. Black women are great, and we just have to claim it.
Yeah. One thing that I am so glad is that there are empowered women in our generation who are setting the example and who are teaching younger women to embrace their power. We talked earlier about being their authentic selves, showing up authentically. So we are, I think, as black women, embracing our powers in ways that we haven't done. Dr. Nita, though, do you think this moment that we find ourselves in, where black women are on, we're making it in a lot of spaces and places, whether it's politics with, we talked about Kamala Harris or Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court, and, not enough women in the C-suites, but some. But do you feel like, women are ready for this fight? Because we got so much work to do. We got this pain, but we have this power. Are you sensing amongst your colleagues that women are we getting tired, or are we up for the fight?
Oh, we are not tired. We are anything but tired. We are 100% up for the fight. And I think part of the problem is that we don't have a seat at the table. Nothing about us without us is a slogan that we use to communicate the idea that no policy should be decided by a representative without the full and direct participation of the members of the groups affected by that policy. And part of the problem is people at the quote-unquote top are making these big decisions for women, and they're making these rules and regulations and policies, and there are no women in the room. We have fabulous thoughts and opinions and ideas, and we need to be at the table. And I'm not just talking about one or two of us. We should comprise the majority when it comes to making these decisions. So to answer your question, I absolutely know that we are up for the challenge, and we are more than capable, and we don't need our male counterparts making all of these decisions on our behalf. If we had a seat at the table, things would be a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson talked a lot about the fact that she now has a seat at the table and marginalized people are invisible no more. And that sister just didn't say that as at her investiture ceremony. She went straight to work. Her first couple of days on that court giving a straight up history lesson to the litigants, to her fellow justices, to everybody on race, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, and how those amendments were enacted not to be race neutral, but to center race, to stamp out white oppression of the former slaves, the recently freed slaves. So women are showing up in some incredible places. Yes, we need more seats at the table for sure. Dr. Nita, we have so much more work to do, but I'm so encouraged by the women that have been a part of this conversation about the state of black women, because every one of you, Dr. Nita, April Simpkins, Dr. Julianne Malvo, you ladies are living examples of the power that black women have, the power in our communities, and what we can do when we use that power. And Dr. Malvo, I just got to say this. Your comment about Brother Biden, let's not forget, he just pardoned 6,500 of your relatives, who had federal marijuana charges. So we got to give Brother Biden some props up in this space, even though we're talking about black women.
But you know what, Areva? What Shirley Chisholm once said is, if they don't have a seat at the table for you, bring a folding chair.
All right. That's Sister Chisholm, and she set the table for Barack Obama. She set the table for Kamala Harris. And we want to give her a lot of props too for just being an incredible champion. Ladies, I wish we had 500 more hours, because that's how rich this conversation is about black women. But thanks to all of you for joining me for State of Black Women. You have been listening to an Agenda for America, an African American perspective.
Santa Monica.
I'm Kevin Brown, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Those convicted of simple possession of marijuana are being handed a presidential pardon. President Biden announced it applies to everyone who has a conviction on that charge at the federal level. He's calling on governors to take some action at the state level. President Biden's son Hunter could be facing criminal charges. According to the Washington Post, investigators have gathered enough evidence on possible tax crime violations. People familiar with the matter tell the Post the U.S. Attorney in Delaware will decide whether charges are filed. Adidas says it's taking a second look at its relationship with Kanye West. He's had a partnership with the sneaker maker since 2013, and it's manufactured and distributed his Yeezy clothing line items from the company. However, the rapper's been vocally critical of Adidas in the past few months. And that's the latest. I'm Kevin Brown from the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Wendy's Biggie Bag is still just $5. Get a double-stack junior bacon cheeseburger or crispy chicken BLT plus 4-piece nugs, small fries, and a small drink. Grab your bag at Wendy's today. Includes choice of double-stack JBC or crispy chicken BLT with 4-piece nugs, small drink, and fries. U.S. price and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Alaska and Hawaii.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases.